We start here in Tokyo, where another important part of the upcoming Olympic and Paralympic Games is taking shape. Just 50 days before the events kick off, organizers gave aspiring athletes something to dream about. A look at where and how the world's best will be given their medals. This setup follows Japan's themes of rebuilding and sustainability. The podium is made of recycled plastic. The iconic emblem comes from scrap material used to build temporary houses after a 2011 earthquake and tsunami struck eastern Japan. Organizers also unveiled the indigo blue clothing for volunteers and trays that'll hold the all-important hardware at all 878 victory ceremonies. But past the podium, the host city remains under a state of emergency. The government's top coronavirus advisor says the Games would never ordinarily be held under this sort of health emergency.
The Olympic Committee and the government must thoroughly fulfill their responsibilities in order to gain the support of the public. If they go ahead with their plans, they must do so with firm resolve to take all possible antivirus measures.
Omi said officials should keep events as small as possible and urged locals to watch the Games at home. A senior lawmaker from the ruling coalition urged Prime Minister Suga Yoshihide to speak directly to the public.
Prime Minister Suga should thoroughly explain to the people, once again, the significance of the Olympics, why the Games should go ahead.
A top member of the main opposition party also had a message for Suga. He accused the prime minister of not clearly stating where blame will fall if something goes wrong. Public opinion polls show many aren't sure the city should host the Games at all. The chief of the Japanese Olympic Committee says he's aware, but is convinced the event can be held safely.
We need to explain in more detail how we plan to prevent infections during the events, while providing examples.
Yamashita says he hopes people can safely see the competition with their own eyes. But if it's too risky to have people travel to events, he says the Games will need to be held without spectators. As Olympic preparations speed up, medical facilities in southern Japan are buckling under the strain of the pandemic. Okinawa has the highest number of new per capita cases among all 47 prefectures. This hospital secured more nurses and beds to deal with the surge. 30 to 50 beds were set aside for serious cases last Friday. 42 are already full. This patient in his 60s had to stay home for around 10 days with persistent coughing and a fever. Doctors later confirmed serious lung inflammation.
It's becoming difficult to provide medication early enough, because the number of new patients is increasing so much.
Okinawa is one of 10 prefectures that remain under the coronavirus state of emergency. Health authorities across Japan confirmed more than 2,800 new cases on Thursday. Nationwide efforts to speed up vaccination rollouts continue. Prime Minister Suga met with business leaders on Thursday to encourage them to help get staff inoculated.
If people can get vaccinations at their workplaces, it will significantly reduce the burden on local governments and accelerate the rollout. I think it will be good for business, too.
Vaccines are currently being provided to people aged 65 or over. More than half of Tokyo's 23 wards will be ready to start vaccinating younger people by the end of this month. Now, Japan's government has decided to supply 1.2 million doses of AstraZeneca's vaccine to Taiwan as early as Friday, as the island faces a surge in new infections. The move comes after Prime Minister Suga pledged to send 30 million doses overseas. The government does not plan to use the AstraZeneca vaccine in Japan's inoculation program for the time being. Taiwan is urgently seeking to speed up its vaccination rollout after the virus began to spread rapidly there in mid-May. Japan also plans to help developing countries build so-called cold chains, which allow vaccines to be transported and stored at low temperatures. Taiwanese Foreign Minister Joseph Wu says he hopes to keep strengthening ties with Japan. He highlighted those relations against the backdrop of military pressure from China. Wu spoke Thursday via video link to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. He touched on Chinese military actions and the motives of the Communist Party.
And maritime militias carrying out operations at the order of the military. The CCP regime is exploiting all means possible to induce clashes just below the threshold of a major war.
Wu also suggested the Chinese government is taking advantage of the coronavirus. He said China is trying to get Taiwan's allies to lean toward it by offering them vaccines. Wu also talked up the relationship between Taiwan and Japan.
Taiwan and Japan share the values of freedom, democracy, human rights protection, and the rule of law.
He expressed hopes of working with Japan, the United States, and other like-minded countries in dealing with China. Wu said China has blocked Taiwan's cooperation with the World Health Organization's anti-pandemic efforts. He said Taiwan is gaining greater international political support to be included in the WHO as a member or observer. Two foreign diplomats are visiting Myanmar this week to try to end the violence between the military and anti-coup protesters. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations has so far been tight-lipped about their plans. Sources within ASEAN say the pair will meet with military officials about sending in a special envoy to negotiate with both sides. It's part of a 5-point plan the 10-nation bloc drafted more than a month ago. The document also calls for an immediate end to violence. Myanmar's military chief was at the ASEAN meeting in April, but the junta has yet to implement the plan. In other news, a container ship ravaged by fire is sinking in the Indian Ocean off the coast of Sri Lanka. Concerns are growing the chemicals and fuel on board could leak into the sea and greatly damage the environment. Sri Lankan authorities said the Singapore-flagged Express Pearl was anchored 17 kilometers off the country's largest city of Colombo when it caught fire. The crew was saved, but it took almost 2 weeks to put out the blaze. The ship was carrying about 1,500 containers. That includes 25 tons of nitric acid, other chemicals and cosmetics, and nearly 300 tons of heavy oil. The ship's operator, Express Feeders, says as of Thursday morning, there's no report of oil pollution. But authorities say the ship's stern has submerged. The Sri Lankan Navy is surveying the waters around the vessel over concerns the chemicals and oil could leak. Large amounts of plastic pellets and other debris believed to be part of the ship's cargo have washed up on Sri Lanka's beaches. The government has ordered a suspension of all fishing in nearby areas. Next, people have gathered in Japan's southwestern prefecture of Nagasaki to remember the 43 victims killed in a deadly volcanic eruption 30 years ago. The victims included local residents, volunteer firefighters, and more than a dozen media crew members. They were killed by a fast-moving current of hot gas and volcanic matter called a pyroclastic flow that gushed down from Mount Unzen's Fugen Peak. Omachi Sumi lost her husband in the tragedy.
We, the bereaved families, will work hard to keep the memories of the disaster from fading away. We will contribute to developing the local community so that people can coexist with the volcano and work to revitalize the Shimabara region.
At 4:08 p.m., the exact time of the disaster, people observed a moment of silence at the site where their loved ones were killed. The disaster raised awareness about how lethal pyroclastic surges can be and prompted the government to revise its emergency measures. It also led to the media changing many of its safety practices when reporting on natural disasters. Japan's prime minister has vowed to work for the release of 14 crew members of a Japanese fishing boat being held in Russia. That's according to upper house lawmaker Suzuki Muneo, who discussed the matter with Suga on Thursday. Suzuki spoke to reporters after the meeting.
The Prime Minister said Japan needs to take resolute action on a humanitarian basis. He said he will do his best for the crew members' families who are worried about their loved ones.
The trawler was seized by Russia's border guard authorities last Friday off the coast of Wakkanai City in northern Hokkaido. They say the boat had been operating inside Russia's exclusive economic zone. But officials in Tokyo lodged a protest with their Russian counterparts, saying they've confirmed the boat had actually been within Japan's EEZ. Moving now to the weather. People in parts of the Philippines are dealing with the aftermath of a tropical storm that wreaked havoc with intense downpours. Our meteorologist John Thuno explains the situation in our World Weather Report.
Hello, Choyuan is continuing to really weaken and eventually is expected to really dissipate by the time we head toward Friday. But in the meantime, the storm has brought copious amounts of rainfall into portions of the Philippines. Here's one picture that shows you the situation. Sadly, at least 3 people have been killed because of the storm. 2,600 people displaced because mainly of flooding. And also there are 3,000 people who were stranded in one location because the sea travel being stopped because of the storm. We are expecting this system to just make its way toward the north, but Manila may be dealing with some rain along with the western and central areas of Luzon, so be on the lookout for a wet Friday coming up. Meanwhile, up toward the north into the northeastern areas of China, we had this low pressure system that's brought some strong thunderstorms into the region. Here's a look at some of the video. We are talking about severe weather, including floods, hitting northeastern China, bringing severe damage with floods stranding many vehicles and also disrupting traffic. Hail with a diameter of 1 centimeter or more hit other parts of the region Wednesday, with authorities issuing alerts for thunderstorms, telling people to stay vigilant against lightning and strong winds and other stormy conditions. You can see the hail right there as part of the system. Now, eventually that same low will be moving toward the east, along with another low pressure system that's also moving into Japan. So that's going to really pick up on the rain chances coming up. Heavy rain continuing down for the southern areas of China, so that will continue to be a part of the story as that frontal boundary is in the region. Closer look toward Japan. Again, looking at rain for a good portion of the day on Friday, with winds picking up as well, especially on the coastal areas. Tokyo is seeing some of the heavier rain by the time we go into the afternoon hours. But all in all, you'll want to have your umbrella on Friday because it's going to be a wet day. We're going to see things drying out quite a bit by the time we head into the weekend across the nation. That's a look at your forecast. Hope you have a good day wherever you are.
U.S. officials announce a plan to give 75% of unused COVID-19 vaccines to the United Nations COVAX program, mainly for poor countries. Officials in Sri Lanka struggle to contain environmental damage as a ship carrying chemicals has partially sunk near the port of Colombo. In Sudan, a top lawyer for the International Criminal Court says war crime victims want former Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir brought to the court. And the U.S. Space Agency's new administrator announces plans for NASA to send 2 robotic spacecraft to the planet Venus.
With 50 days to go to the Tokyo Olympics, the head of the organising committee has told the BBC the Games will definitely go ahead. Foreign spectators are already banned, and athletes will have to follow strict COVID rules. US President Joe Biden has unveiled his plans to start distributing vaccines globally. He's announced that the US will share 25 million doses. 19 million will be allocated to COVAX. Portugal will be removed from the UK's green list of countries which British travellers can visit without having to quarantine on their return. The changes will come into effect on June the 8th. And opposition parties in Israel have agreed a coalition deal. They're on the path to forging a new government to remove Benjamin Netanyahu from power. A vote in parliament could be held next week.